In 1716, a Scottish murderer convinced a king to replace gold with paper. By 1720, he had created the world's first stock bubble, minted the first millionaires, and so thoroughly poisoned the word banque that the French government would refuse to use it for the next 80 years. His name was John Law. He died broke in a rented room in Venice. The debt he left behind helped detonate a revolution 70 years later. Law was born in Edinburgh in 1671, the son of a goldsmith who lent money on the side. He inherited the family estate at 17 and gambled most of it away in London by 23. On the morning of April 9, 1694, he shot a man named Edward Wilson dead in a duel in Bloomsbury Square. The fight on paper was about a woman. In practice, it was about debts. Law was convicted of murder, sentenced to hang, and then, through means no historian has ever fully reconstructed, escaped from the King's Bench prison and fled to the continent. He spent the next 20 years moving between Amsterdam, Genoa, Venice, and Paris, making a living at the card tables. He was, by every account, a brilliant probabilist. He could calculate odds in his head faster than the croupier could deal. And while he gambled, he wrote, in 1705, he published a pamphlet called Money and Trade Considered. Its argument was simple and, for the era, heretical. Gold and silver, Law wrote, were a brake on commerce. There was never enough of them. They moved slowly, and kingdoms with shallow mines would always be poorer than kingdoms with deep ones, regardless of what those kingdoms actually produced. The solution was paper. Notes backed not by metal in a vault, but by the productive capacity of the state itself. Issue more notes, Law argued, and you would not cause inflation, you would cause activity. Idle land would be farmed, idle ships would sail, the money would summon the economy into existence. Scotland's Parliament read the pamphlet and turned him down. So did the Duke of Savoy. For 10 years, no sovereign in Europe was desperate enough to try it. Then on September 1st, 1715, Louis XIV died. He left behind the most powerful kingdom on earth and a national debt of roughly 3 billion livres, somewhere between 10 and 20 times the crown's annual revenue, depending on whose ledger you trusted, and nobody trusted any of them. The treasury was insolvent. Tax farmers had been paid years in advance. The 5-year-old heir, Louis XV, was a child, so power fell to the regent. Philippe, Duke of Orléans, a man who liked novelty, distrusted financiers, and had known John Law personally from the gambling salons of Paris. In May of 1716, the regent granted Law a charter. He could open a private bank. He could issue notes. The Banque Générale was born with a capital of 6 million livres and one customer who mattered, the French state. The notes worked. That is the strange part. For 2 years, Law's paper actually circulated better than coin. The notes were redeemable in the silver of the day they were issued, which mattered because Louis XIV's government had a habit of debasing the currency without warning, and a fixed-weight paper note was suddenly more reliable than a French ACU. Merchants preferred them. Tax collectors accepted them. By 1718, the regent was so impressed he nationalized the bank, renamed it the Banque Royale, and declared its notes legal tender across the kingdom. The king's signature was now on the paper. The paper was now the money. And Law, the convicted murderer from Edinburgh, was, in everything but title, running French monetary policy. The bank was only half the machine. The other half was the Mississippi Company. Law had acquired a near-dormant trading concern in 1717, the Compagnie d'Occident, which held a 25-year monopoly on French Louisiana. On the map, Louisiana was enormous, the entire Mississippi watershed, from New Orleans to what is now Montana. In reality, it was swamp, mosquitoes, and a few hundred starving colonists. Law didn't care. He folded in the tobacco monopoly, then the African slave trade concession, then the China and East Indies companies, then the Royal Mint. Then, in August 1719, he agreed that his company would take over the entire French national debt, 3 billion livres, in exchange for the right to collect every indirect tax in the kingdom. By the autumn of 1719, a single joint stock company, run by one Scotsman, controlled French colonial trade, French taxation, French currency issuance, and French sovereign debt. There has never been anything quite like it before or since. The share price did what share prices do when a story that big gets told. In January 1719, a share in the Compagnie cost 500 livres. By May, 1,000. By August, 5,000. By December, the price touched 10,000 livres, a 20-fold gain in 11 months. The narrow street outside Law's offices, the Rue Quincampoix, became Europe's first true stock exchange. Servants who had bought a single share in January were riding in carriages by November. A hunchback reportedly rented out his back as a writing desk for traders signing contracts in the street and retired wealthy. It was during these months that a French journalist reached for a new word to describe the people minted on Rue Quincampoix. He called them millionaires. The word had not existed before. It existed now because Law's paper had created enough of them to need a name. Here is the trick the machine depended on. To buy shares, you used Banque Royale notes. To pay dividends, the Banque Royale printed more notes. To support the share price when it wobbled, Law printed more notes and bought shares with them. By early 1720, the money supply had roughly doubled. Prices in Paris rose 40% in a single year, and the people holding paper began quietly to do the math. In February 1720, the Prince de Conti pulled up to the Banque Royale with 3 wagons and demanded his notes be redeemed in gold. He got it. Word spread. The Medici had learned the same lesson 3 centuries earlier on a smaller stage. When depositors lose faith in the ledger, no amount of prestige saves the institution. Law tried everything. He banned the private ownership of more than 500 livres in gold. He banned diamonds. He devalued the notes by half by decree, then reversed the decree a week later when riots broke out. On July 17, 1720, a crowd crushed itself trying to redeem notes at the bank's doors. 15 people died in the street. The regent, watching from across the river, understood the system was finished. By December 1720, the shares were worthless, the notes were waste paper, and John Law was riding out of France in a borrowed carriage with 1 diamond sewn into his coat. He died in Venice 9 years later, supporting himself once again at the card tables. The French government quietly assumed what was left of the debt and went back to taxing peasants in silver. But the deeper wound never closed. The word banque became so radioactive that French state finance avoided it for nearly a century. The institution that eventually replaced the Banque Royale was called the Caisse d'Escompte because nobody dared put the word bank on a French building again. More importantly, the crown had now defaulted in spirit on a generation of small holders. Lawyers, merchants, widows, the exact people who would in 1789 refuse to lend the crown another sou. The Estates General was called because Louis XVII could not borrow. He could not borrow because his great-grandfather's regent had let a Scottish gambler turn the kingdom's debt into confetti. Every empire eventually discovers that money is a story the public agrees to believe. Law's mistake was not printing the paper. It was forgetting that the public was reading along. The receipts of his 4 years in Paris are still legible in the French language itself. Millionaire, the word he minted, and bankrupt, the word he made unsayable. The first fortune he built, the second is what broke him.